Welcome home. I've never asked a squirrel to tell me a story. I've never expected abstract thinking from a dolphin or assumed one could fabricate an entire new worldview and characters for me to imagine. Some would say that I should not expect these things from animals, that creativity, imagination is something that is solely human. I was a child lying in my bed, listening to my dad's stories from the floor, living, changing, restless creations that came to life the second the words left his mouth. They always had the opposite effect of a bedtime story. I would stare at my blank ceiling at night, recounting them in my mind over and over again, truly just existing in those fabricated worlds. I woke up, I ran off to school, I daydreamed in class, and when lunch came, knees grazed by grass and hands clasped in friends' hands, we made believe we were anything and everything. All this to say, regardless of whether or not animals have the capacity to be creative or create art, I will always go to a human when I want a story. They're definitely in my top 2 storytelling species on the planet, and they have been for a long time. It's likely that humans have been telling stories to each other since gaining the ability to speak. There's something about our brain that craves knowledge, the joy of discovering. We just want more than what we can see through our pathetically limited eyes. Oral storytelling has been part of humanity for further back than we can even trace. Obviously, was and is a very large component of many civilizations. But I'm thinking, in my pea-sized brain, who was the first that decided a story could be written? When did humans decide to document their creativity in a tangible way? Hi, I'm Fig Tree. Welcome home. I'm an archaeologist, and today we're talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh. These are 3D glasses that I poked the lens out of when I was 9 years old. 5,500 years ago, today, the world began to write. It was the Sumerians, of course. Who else? The Sumerians developed a method of writing called cuneiform, which was achieved by pressing different wedge-shaped symbols into clay. It came about kind of purely from a bureaucratic need to document things like administration, trade, income, all that boring shit. And it wasn't until 500 years after its creation that this writing system was used to record more religious and artistic things. As time goes on, the Sumerian written language grows and evolves and is soon able to record large accounts of legends, like that of Enmerkar and the Lord of Arata, in which the creation of writing itself is actually documented. So although this is a legend and is thus a fictionalized account, this is still such a beautiful moment where we see the society that created the written word recounting in writing the moment that it happened. In it, there's a messenger who goes to the Lord of Kulaba to deliver a spoken message, and he's tasked with bringing one back, but he's so goddamn tired after delivering this message that the king writes it down for him instead. The king's speech was substantial and its contents extensive. The messenger, whose mouth was heavy and tired, was not able to repeat it. The Lord of Kulaba patted some clay and wrote the message as if on a tablet. Until then, there had been no putting words on clay. Now, under that sun and on that day, it was indeed so. Well, shit. With writing established as a poetic medium through which you could explore, all things integral to humanity, God, love, food, the universe, it became quite evident in Sumerian culture. And we see many hymns and poems and laments written in the Sumerian language. The Epic of Gilgamesh is an ancient Sumerian tale, arguably the first of its kind, the first story ever written. It began, of course, as a spoken story passed down through generations. It is a beautifully exquisite weaving together friendship and sacrifice and man and God and mortality, themes that have evidently burdened humanity since our beginning. It was around 2100 BC, someone decided to write this oral story down for the first time in Sumerian cuneiform. And the first iteration of this story actually took place over 5 poems and centered on the hero Gilgamesh. A lot of these poems are quite fragmentary and lack that typical sort of plot development from poem to poem that you would come to expect from a sequential story. But the tale was a very well-known one at the time and was like a big part of popular culture in Sumer. And centuries later, when the Akkadian Empire was expanding through the region, we get the same story written down in the Akkadian language. This is when Bilgamesh becomes Gilgamesh. Now, this first Akkadian version is often referred to as the Old Babylonian version of the text, and quite a few tablets of this version have survived. Our most complete version of the text in its final form, and what most people refer to when they refer to the Epic of Gilgamesh, appears at around 1300 BC and is called the Standard Babylonian version. It is also referred to by its incipit or its opening line, "He who saw the deep." Like I said, there are different versions of this text, and older versions, including the Old Babylonian version, have a different incipit, begin with a different opening line. And this opening line and the change made of this opening line is actually quite integral to the entire theme of the poem and the way that it changes throughout the different versions that we have of it. In the past, the opening line was surpassing all other kings, referencing Gilgamesh. He is surpassing all other kings. He's the best. He's the best of the kings. The opening line of our version that we're going to be talking about, the standard Babylonian version, also refers to Gilgamesh, but it calls him he who saw the deep. There's a bit of a difference there, and we'll get into it later, but essentially one holds him to the standard of king by virtue of his inherent heroism that we don't really question. The other imbues him with some sort of intelligence, with some sort of knowledge that hasn't been achieved by other people. He saw into the deep. What is the deep? We'll get into it, but I just want to point that out because when I talk about it later, I want to have said something about it. Anyway, should we just get into it? I'm going to give you a little rundown of the story. By little rundown, I mean it's going to be quite a long rundown. Let's start with Tablet 1. The epic opens on the description of our god-man Gilgamesh. Who is there that can be compared with him in kingly status and can say, like Gilgamesh, it is I am the king? Gilgamesh was his name from the day he was born. 2/3 of him God, but 1/3 of him human. Wow. And he acts like it. He terrorizes his city of Uruk, not out of malevolence necessarily, but out of what seems to be this insatiable sense of desire and power. He's unlike man in a lot of ways. He can't really exist on their level. His mother is the goddess Nisun, and his father was a deified king. So he's got this demigod kind of status going on. And he has no equal. There is no man who can compare to him. While he is described as a little bit of a tyrant, we also do get some positive attributes in that he built the city walls surrounding Uruk, and he is drop dead gorgeous. He built the wall of Uruk. Go up onto the wall of Uruk and walk around. Survey the foundation platform. Inspect the brickwork. See if its brickwork is not kiln-fired brick, and if the 7 sages did not lay its foundations. And in doing so, he not only built the walls of the city protecting the city, but he built the walls of the city and created the civilization and the society and the life within it. He's strong and he's powerful and he's heroic. But still, his people suffer. He tires them out and he exerts all their energy. It's implied that he does this through acts of sexual conquest, or perhaps through the contests and like athletic competitions. This characterization of Gilgamesh is quite a truthful reflection of what we know of Babylonian kings. Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar II made copious demands of their subjects, and this portrayal of Gilgamesh probably mirrors the way that Babylonian people felt the ambitions of a powerful king can bring down a sort of tyranny on their people. So glad we don't have to worry about that anymore. But it's clear that his behavior is deemed unkingly, and it's an issue. So much of an issue, in fact, that the mother goddess Aruru is tasked with creating a counterpart to engage the energies of Gilgamesh. Someone's got to put a leash on him. And so Enkidu is created from clay, as the first men were. He comes to life fully grown, not having been born, without a mother's cries. He's created in silence in the forest. And he lives in an animal state. He's hairy, he's unclothed, he's ungoverned by presumably human worries and thoughts of family or of the gods or his wider social identity. Sounds like a vibe. He feeds with the gazelles on grass and water, and the poem compares him explicitly to these first men, dwelling far removed from civilization before the installation of sedentary society, which, as we know, the Sumerians were the first to do. Aruru washed her hands. She took a pinch of clay. She threw it down in the wild. In the wild she created Enkidu, the hero, an offspring of silence. All his body is matted with hair. He knows not at all a people, nor even a country. Feeding on grass with the very gazelles, jostling at the waterhole with the herd, he enjoyed the water with the animals. The Sumerians, as the first people to have transitioned from a hunter-gatherer society to a sedentary one, are showing the importance they put on civilization and society in this one character's introduction. It's clear they really value this transition, even though it would have taken place thousands of years ago at the point of this epic being written. It is something that is playing in their mind. They're distinguishing themselves from animals and from these earlier men. He was raised by animals, he thinks like one, he acts like one, until he's discovered by a hunter. The hunter comes across him in the wild and is shocked at the sight of this man who is in the shape of a man but is acting like an animal. He realizes that Enkidu is the reason he's been having some issues. His traps and his snares have all been broken by this creature, and now he's realizing that Enkidu is the creature. He goes to his dad and is like, "Dad, what do I do about this wild man in the forest?" And the old man concocts a genius plan that honestly would not have crossed my mind. He tells the hunter to go into the city of Uruk, grab a prostitute, and bring her back with him so that her charms may lure Enkidu away from this animalistic life. And this works. So the hunter goes into the city, meets this prostitute named Samhat, and the two go back to the waterhole. The gazelles come to drink at the waterhole, and Enkidu is of course among them. And the hunter encourages Samhat to use the tricks of her trade to seduce Enkidu, which she does. Enkidu and Shamhat lay with each other for 1 entire week. Enkidu's sexual appetite, I suppose, is like the rest of him. It's animalistic. And there's perhaps a bit of intentional comedy in this scene and in the exaggeration and hyperbole of it all. When Enkidu is finally satisfied, he turns once again to rejoin the animals. He's like, all right, that was fun. Let's head on. But he can't. He's no longer one of them. He's lost some crucial innocence. He's seen as human and the animals fear him. The gazelles saw Enkidu and they started running. The animals of the wild moved away from his person. Enkidu had defiled his body so pure. His legs stood still, though his herd was on the move. Enkidu was diminished. His running was not as before, but he had reason. He was wide of understanding. At the same time, he has gained some broader knowledge. He has reason. He's human. He sacrificed an animalistic kind of peace for a human intelligence. The concept of defilement through sexual experience is one that appears throughout human history and aligns with the seemingly widespread human belief that sexual knowledge brings the end of innocence. It's fascinating to be able to trace this back to literally the first story ever written. This moment also obviously kind of parallels the fall of man. Enkidu is fashioned from clay by the gods, like Adam and Eve. And just like Adam and Eve, he forsakes his purity in discovering his sexuality. They fall out of the grace of God, but in doing so are actually able to fully embrace their humanity. It's a sacrifice that's inevitable in this thematic. Humanity must be achieved, but to do so, purity must be lost. It's just, you can't, they're mutually exclusive. So yeah. Shamhat says to Enkidu that she's going to take him back to Uruk and he can meet Gilgamesh. And Enkidu, only just having become human, he's a little bit traumatized. He's desperate for a friend, an equal. Sounds like someone else we know. Despite this though, given Shamhat's explanation of Gilgamesh as a tyrant, Enkidu intends to arrive in Uruk and beat the shit out of him. She warns him that Gilgamesh is really strong and that he's also the sun god's favorite, so to challenge him would be an act of blasphemy. Not only this, but the gods have also arranged for Gilgamesh to have a little two-dream premonition moment of an enemy's arrival. So he's going to be prepared metaphysically. Back in Uruk, we see that Gilgamesh does in fact have a couple dreams. He wakes up and he comes to his mother in a state of confusion and tells her about his dreams. "Oh mother, the dream that I saw in the course of this night, the stars of the heavens appeared before me. Like lumps of rock from the sky, they kept falling towards me. I picked one up, but it was too much for me. I kept trying to roll it, but I could not dislodge it. The land of Uruk was standing around it. A crowd was jostling before it. They were kissing its feet like little babies. I loved it like a wife, and I caressed and embraced it. I picked it up and set it down at your feet, and you made it my equal." His mother, as many mothers are, is wonderful at interpreting dreams and tells him, "A mighty companion will come to you, the savior of his friend. He is the mightiest in the land. His strength is as mighty as a lump of rock from the sky. You will love him like a wife, caressing and embracing him. He, being mighty, will often save you. Favorable and precious was your dream." So in the first dream, what's often interpreted as a meteorite has fallen to the ground, and Gilgamesh tries to pick it up, but it's too heavy, he can't budge it. And a crowd gathers around it in awe. He manages to bring it back to his mother, who makes it his equal. And his mother predicts that this means the coming of a friend, who Gilgamesh will love like a wife, and who will save him. The second dream is very similar to the first, but instead of a meteorite, Gilgamesh sees an axe lying in the street. Again, it's the center of the crowd's attention. He loves it as he would love a wife. He takes it to his mother makes it his equal, and she also interprets this dream as meaning that a friend will come and it will be his savior. As the text continues in the second tablet, we really mark Enkidu's transition into humanity. Shamhat clothes him in some of her garments. Shepherds offer him bread and beer. At first, he simply just doesn't know how to respond. How to eat bread, he had never even been taught. How to drink ale, Enkidu did not know. He's never encountered human food or drink before. In earlier versions of the text, Shamhat encourages him to drink, and he promptly becomes drunk and starts singing. Very human. This part marks his transformation from beast to man. A barber shaves off his coat of animal hair. He uses scented oil to perfume his body in the Babylonian fashion. And with each human luxury that he experiences, he sheds a part of his animalistic past. But to truly fulfill his destiny, he needs to go from the wild to the city. The city, again, as an urban center, is incredibly important in this Babylonian understanding of civilization. Arriving in the city of Uruk, Enkidu hears of a wedding that's going down, and that Gilgamesh intends to go to the wedding and deflower the bride before the groom has a chance to consummate the marriage, which is not very kosher. And Enkidu is enraged by this, and so he stands in the doorway of the house where the ceremony is taking place, and he bars Gilgamesh from entering. He blocks his way. In lines that echo Gilgamesh's dream, a crowd starts to form around Enkidu, admiring and in awe of him. And then our two heroes finally duke it out in the streets of Uruk. They fight so hard that the ground rumbles and the doors of the houses nearby shake on their hinges. But for once in both of their lives, each of them has an equal. Enkidu eventually submits to Gilgamesh's authority, and as it was predicted, the two make friends, finally presented with another who can rival them in strength and divinity. Gilgamesh himself being 2 parts god, 1 part human, and Enkidu having been created by the gods, they share this kind of divinity that no other man can really hope to attain. Gilgamesh introduces his new best friend to his mom, and is clearly quite infatuated with him. He is the mightiest in the land. His strength is as mighty as a lump of rock from the sky. Tall in stature, majestic as a battlement. So his mom, not reading the room at all, straight up just tells Enkidu to his face how weird she thinks he is. And the fact that it was strange that he was birthed in silence without a mother and has no family, to which Enkidu is immediately reduced to tears. And Gilgamesh tries to comfort him. They took hold of each other, and Gilgamesh to Enkidu, he said a word, saying, "Why, my friend, did your eyes fill with tears?" Enkidu said to him, "My friend, my heart was made to ache. Through sobbing, terror has entered my heart." Perhaps in an effort to distract Enkidu from his misery, Gilgamesh proposes that the two of them go for a little adventure to the cedar forest. The cedar forest is a very faraway place, visited only at the greatest peril, but it's not an entirely mythical location. We can actually place the cedar forest in actual real-life geography. Various versions also refer to it as the land of Ebla, which would be in modern-day Lebanon. So there we go. It's a real place. You can go there, but not anymore actually, and you'll find out why. Humbaba is the guardian of the cedar forest. He was appointed by the god Enlil, and he is a powerful beast of a creature. And Gilgamesh suggests that the two of them go and just fuck him up. This doesn't really cheer Enkidu up too much, because he warns Gilgamesh that Humbaba is really strong and a lethal enemy, to which Gilgamesh calls him a little bitch and tells him to live a little. "Why, my friend, do you speak like a weakling? With your feeble talk you vex my heart. As for man, his days are numbered. All that he ever did is but dust." He wants to make a name for himself. Gilgamesh wants to leave some kind of legacy, and he convinces Enkidu that this is a worthwhile task as well. And so off they go. Tablets 3 and 4 are quite short and sort of just encompass them preparing to go on their expedition. Let's jump to tablet 5, in which the pair make it to the forest, and they meet its terrifying guardian, Humbaba. And so begin in earnest Gilgamesh's constant and continuous affronts to the gods and to godliness itself. Humbaba runs his mouth about how Gilgamesh should not be cavorting with the spawn of a fish who knew not his father, Enkidu. Now, these two are bros plus a little extra, so Gilgamesh is ready to fight to defend bro's honor. The battle begins and is so intense, these 3 divine beings unleashing all of their power, that it splits the cedar forest in half, creating the mountain ranges of Lebanon and anti-Lebanon. That's why those are there. Battle continues until the sun god Shamash sends down 13 winds to disorient and blind Humbaba. Shamash, he's the sun god. He is quite fond of our hero Gilgamesh. He's his little favorite, right? So this disorients him enough for Gilgamesh to strike the final blow, which he does. The great, fearsome Humbaba is reduced to pleading for his life, willing to become Gilgamesh's servant just to stay alive. When that doesn't work, he goes to Enkidu and he pleads with him to please change Gilgamesh's mind. Let him save me. Now, Enkidu obviously has no interest in keeping this guy alive. He was just being extremely rude to him earlier. So he tells Gilgamesh to hurry up and kill him, and to do it quickly, because he suspects that when the god Enlil finds out what happened here, he's not going to be too pleased. He's the one who appointed Humbaba as the guardian of the forest, if you recall. In fact, Enkidu anticipates that all the gods are going to be pretty angry at what they've done, even Shamash, who helped them win the battle. Drunk with victory, Enkidu seems to have completely discarded the respect for the gods that made him such a worthy opponent to Gilgamesh in the first couple tablets. It's clear that he is also buying into this idea of eternal fame by way of glory. We have a special name for this kind of ego and affrontation to the gods in the business. This is called hubris. And not to spoil this 5,000-year-old poem, but hubris never ends well for the hubri. With Humbaba's dying breath, he curses our heroes. May the pair of them not grow old. Apart from his friend Gilgamesh, may Enkidu have nobody to bury him. Weird and ominous. That will be relevant soon. The implication for Enkidu here is that he will remain without family. He was born without family. Turns out he's going to stay that way. He will have no one except his friend to look after his funeral rites and burial. Anyway, the two god-defying heroes take off on a raft from the scene of the crime and are sailing on the waters when Ishtar, the patron goddess of the city of Uruk, also a goddess of love and war, spots them. And she's immediately taken by Gilgamesh and wishes to marry him. Maybe she didn't hear about his brutal affront towards the gods, I don't know. The lady Ishtar looked covetously on the beauty of Gilgamesh. Come, Gilgamesh, you be the bridegroom. Grant me your fruits, I insist. You shall be my husband, and I will be your wife. Her words in this little scene play on the conventional verba solemnia of a marriage proposal. She speaks as if she were a young man courting her betrothed. So it's a little bit of subverting the narrative there. She tries to win his heart with the promise of gifts and offers to even send him a personal war chariot pulled by lion monsters. She also says that when you come into our house, doorway and throne shall kiss your feet. The very structure of her home, the furniture itself, will welcome Gilgamesh as he enters her home, which is a level of devotion that I require at any and all times. Now get ready for this essay. Gilgamesh opened his mouth to speak, saying to the lady Ishtar, "If indeed I were to take you in marriage, will you feed me bread fit for a god? Will you pour me ale fit for a king? Who would take you in marriage? You that does not solidify, ice, an Arkabinu door that does not block breeze and drought, a palace that massacres its warriors, a water skin that wets him who carries it, a shoe that bites the foot of its owner. What bridegroom of yours endured forever? What brave warrior of yours is there who went up to heaven? Come, let me count the numbers of your lovers. And would you love me and change me as you did them?" So that was Gilgamesh rejecting Ishtar's marriage proposal via lengthy and absolutely scathing monologue. He's very aware that marriage to Ishtar would not be typical by any means, her being a goddess and all that. He just wouldn't be able to handle it. The marriage would surely lack the comforts that one would expect from marrying a woman. You know, feeding him, clothing him, taking care of him, being a mother, a wife. In his eyes, he can't imagine why anyone would choose to marry Ishtar. Why would they, when she's had such an array of lovers in the past, whose fates have always ended up kind of a little bit unfavorably? He lists all of her various love affairs, kind of a dog move, but he also lists how they all ended terribly. Her first love, she left brokenhearted. He lists an array of bestial affairs she seems to have had. The Alalu bird, whose wing Ishtar broke, leading to his characteristic call. The lion, whose fate is to be hunted with traps. And the horse, which is broken in for the service of men. She was in love with a shepherd, who she ended up turning into a wolf, and then he was chased by his own dogs. So you see the issue here, right? And Gilgamesh asks her, if she were to love him, how can he be expected to be treated any differently? Fair. After being exposed to this long and truthful barrage of abuse, Ishtar understandably reacts with anger. She runs off to her parents. Her father, with all the grace and conviction of man, says, "Ah, but did you not provoke King Gilgamesh?" Thanks for your input, sir. This does little to tame the forest of indignation coursing through Ishtar's blood at this point, so she pleads with her father. "Oh father, give me please the bull of heaven, that I may slay Gilgamesh in his dwelling. If you will not give me the bull of heaven, I shall smash the underworld together with its dwelling place. I shall raise the nether regions to the ground. I shall bring up the dead to consume the living. I shall make the dead outnumber the living." The bull of heaven, identified by the constellation Taurus, shout out to my Tauruses, it's almost your time, is a heavenly animal with which Ishtar wishes to kill Gilgamesh. If she doesn't get the bull, she threatens to release all the dead from the underworld so that they come up to the world of the living and consume the living. Gotta say, I like her style. That's hardcore. The threat of the rising dead is actually quite a common fear that is tackled in Babylonian literature. And it's clearly pretty freaking terrifying because Anu relents, allowing our favorite Nepo baby complete and utter control over this celestial beast of a creature. She leads the bull of heaven down to Uruk, where its fiery presence alone withers all the vegetation and evaporates the water from the rivers. Each snort of its breath opens up a huge pit in the earth where hundreds of people are just falling through, including Enkidu. Uh-oh. Is Hubaba's curse coming true? No. He's unreasonably large, so he climbs right back out and he wrestles the bull by the horns. And he manages to overpowering it using a technique that we can actually see replicated in Babylonian art. He holds down the tail while pushing down on the hook of the hoof of the bull of the leg. While Enkidu holds the bull in this position, Gilgamesh stabs it in the neck and kills it. The boys are at it again, killing divine beasts. And our two lovely boys hold a banquet in honor of their victory, not over just the bull of heaven, but over the goddess Ishtar herself. Enkidu wakes the morning after the party full of dread. Been there. He had a dream. In it, he saw all the gods absolutely furious about our little heroes killing Humbaba and also the bull of heaven. That's 2 strikes. Okay, 3 strikes and you're out. Except if you're Enkidu, it's 2 strikes and you're out. They decide that as punishment for these offenses, one of the pair must die. Enlil says it must be Enkidu. As Gilgamesh was listening to the words of Enkidu, his friend, swiftly and soon his tears were flowing. Gilgamesh opened his mouth to speak, saying to Enkidu, "Why, my friend, did your heart talk profanities? Though there is much fear, the dream was precious. To the ones who survived, grieving was left. The deceased left sorrow to the ones who survived." After hearing about Enkidu's dream, Gilgamesh is distraught, saying that the pain of death is not the pain of the deceased, but it's the sorrow that is left behind to the living. And he is so full of sorrow, knowing that his friend will soon be dead. In what I can only describe as a spiral of anxiety, Gilgamesh just starts rattling off ideas of how he can convince the gods to keep Enkidu alive. He's like, I'm going to make a sick-ass golden statue in your likeness. I'm going to beg the gods. I'm going to plead with them, all of this. But Enlil has spoken, and his judgment can never be altered. Enkidu will die before his time. After all, he was cursed to never grow old. As dawn breaks, Enkidu watches his last sunrise on earth with tears in his eyes, and he curses the hunter who first saw him in the wild and inadvertently brought him into the world of humanity, and so to his death. And he also curses the woman he lay with, Shamhat. By seducing him in the wild, she deprived him of the strength and purity that he was created with. His anger and vitriol then is not aimed directly at the hunter or Shamhat, but at this painfully human feeling of loss of innocence, and even more so of needing to come to terms with one's own mortality, of being aware of death in a way that animals are not. Enkidu gained wisdom. He became human. He found an equal. But now everything that he gained can be lost. So fragile is the human condition. As Enkidu lies on his deathbed, he tells Gilgamesh of another dream he had the night before. "Quite something, my friend, was the dream I saw during the course of this night. The heavens thundered, the earth responded, with me standing there between them. There was a man. His expression was grim. His face was like that of an Anzu bird. His hands were lion's paws, his claws an eagle's talons. He took hold of my hair. He was too strong for me. I struck him, so he sprang back like a skipping rope. He struck me and capsized me like a raft. Like a mighty wild bull, he trampled over me. 'Rescue me, my friend,' I called to you. But you were afraid of him. He struck me. He turned me into a dove. He bound my arms like the wings of a bird to lead me captive to the house of darkness, to the house which those who enter cannot leave, on the journey whose way cannot be retraced, to the house whose residents are deprived of light, where dust is their sustenance, their food clay." Enkidu is describing his own death and his journey into the underworld. The monster he describes is an angel of death who overpowers Enkidu, and his cries of help go unheeded by a terrified Gilgamesh. It seems that we found the one thing that can strike fear into our divine hero, death. This angel of death turns Enkidu into a bird to take him into the underworld, which, sidebar, I'll say is actually quite an interesting little tidbit when you think about the Babylonian tradition and practice of clothing the dead in feathers. Kind of funky. Anyway, it's an incredibly moving and eerie insight into the world of the dead through the eyes of someone who is still living. The residents of the underworld see no light. Their existence is not exactly hellish, but it's kind of worse. It's dull. They survive off of dust and clay. After recounting his dream, the last of Enkidu's strength is depleted, and he lingers for 12 days on his deathbed. On the last day, he summons Gilgamesh one more time. And there's this beautiful passage where he compares his death, his spurring by the gods, to those who fall in battle. He speaks of this idea that a heroic death brings fame and glory, and in a way, everlasting life. But dying in one's bed brings nothing of the sort. And so Humbaba's curse comes true for Enkidu. This one's about pain. At the very first light of dawn, Gilgamesh was mourning for his friend. O Enkidu, whom your mother a gazelle and your father a wild donkey created, whom the wild asses reared with their milk, and the animals of the wild taught all the pastures. May the paths, Enkidu, of the cedar forest mourn you, and not by day or night. May the elders of the populous city of Uruk mourn you. May the holy Euphrates mourn you. Gilgamesh is mourning for Enkidu, and in doing so creates this horrifically heartbreaking lament for his friend, the literary structure of which is sort of presented as this crescendo of grief. He describes the effect of Enkidu's death on everyone, from this kind of wider circle of acquaintances, being just the people of Uruk, to the closest tortured anguish of his best friend. The mourners also include inanimate parts of the natural world, the paths of the cedar forest, the animals of the forest that knew him then mourn for him, and Gilgamesh mourns for him. I shall mourn Enkidu, my friend. Like a professional mourning woman, I shall lament bitterly. The axe at my side in which my arm trusted, the sword of my belt, the shield in front of me. A wicked wind has risen up against me and robbed me. My friend Enkidu, a mule on the run, donkey of the uplands, panther of the wild. We it was who joined forces and climbed the uplands, seized the bull of heaven and killed it, destroyed Humbaba, who dwelt in the cedar forest. Now what sleep is it that has seized you? You have become unconscious and cannot hear me. But he would not lift his head. He felt his heart, but it was not beating any more. He covered his friend, veiling his face like a bride. Bro, why'd that get me like tearing up? In this lament, Enkidu is remembered as Gilgamesh's most treasured possession, a trusty weapon, a beautiful garment that has been taken from him by death, the invisible thief. We get what I must say is quite a beautiful use of anaphora in these next few lines when Gilgamesh is going through the burial process, which he later says he only allowed to happen after 7 days and nights of weeping. I shall lay you out on a great bed. On a bed of honor I shall lay you out. I shall set you on a restful seat, the seat to my left. The princes of the earth will kiss your feet. I shall make weep for you the people of Uruk. I shall make them sob for you. The people so bonny I shall fill full of grief for you. And I, after you are gone, I shall have myself bear the matted hair of mourning. I shall don the skin of a lion and go roaming in the wild. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, it takes a pretty depressing turn after this, but we got 3 tablets left. I don't know why he's built like that. Gilgamesh does what he vowed to do. He wanders around and he mourns his friend Enkidu. But he is... How should I say this? He's not well. He's walking around the wilderness. He kills a lion and wears only its skin to keep himself warm. He stops shaving his beard. He grows his hair long. In a way, it's almost like he's kind of emulating Enkidu when he was first found in the wild. Maybe this is a subconscious sort of trauma response. I don't know. Fuck off. One night he wakes up from a terrifying dream. Have you noticed how important dreams are yet to this story? In this dream, he was contemplating his own mortality in the face of Enkidu's death. For his friend Enkidu, Gilgamesh was weeping bitterly as he roamed the wild. I shall die, and shall I not then be like Enkidu? Sorrow has entered my heart. I became afraid of death, so go roaming the wild. He woke with a start. It was a dream. In the presence of the moon, he grew happy to be alive. Essentially, he is so distraught by the death of his friend that he wonders if he should not too just lie down and die. When he is then confronted with death and realizes, in fact, oh my God, that's terrifying. He can't actually deal with the concept of dying, and he's gonna do something about that. All of a sudden, death is literally unacceptable. So this is when he resolves to go looking for Uttanapishti. This is the name of the man who survived the great flood sent by the gods to wipe out all of humankind, and is the only mortal to ever be granted everlasting life. The flood, you may have heard of. It's definitely a popular metaphor for human destruction in Sumerian and Babylonian literature, and obviously echoes, or rather is echoed, in the biblical story of Noah's Ark. Many generations of Sumerians and Babylonians would have experienced widespread flooding in this region. This flood myth was very closely linked with the human experience. Don't worry, I'll tell you a little bit more about the flood myth when we get there. We'll get there when we get there, kids. But all you need to know in this instance is that our Noah is Uttanapishti, and he was given the gift of immortality after surviving the flood. And he lives in a really faraway place where no mortal should or could ever go. This is the place where the sun rises, and to get to it, Gilgamesh must travel through the path of the sun, which is a big long tunnel. Wait, now that he's dead, I gotta put down my little Enkidu. It's just Gilgamesh left, unfortunately. Anyway, Shamash, the god of the sun, remember, we love him. He loves our boy Gilgamesh. He uses this path of the sun every night because he has to travel back from where he sets in the evening back to here so he can rise in the morning. And to do so, like, let's say if we have like a little bit of a dome situation going on, Shamash rises through the day and then he sets in the night, right? And then he uses this tunnel to cut through the night to rise again in the day. And this little tunnel is where Gilgamesh has to go through to find Uttanapishti. Follow? The tunnel is completely dark, darker than any mortal could survive, except this mortal, I guess. He has to walk through this tunnel for hours to get there. It's implied that it's an entire day's length of 12 double hours, so 24 hours. He begins to walk. He can't see in front of him or behind him in the darkness, and the hours pass slowly. He struggles for breath in the heat. We get a long passage of each hour passing and still the same unrelenting darkness, wind blowing in his face, insufferable heat. But as the 24th hour or the 12th double hour approaches, it finally begins to lighten. At 12 double hours, he came out before the sun. There was brilliance. Upon seeing the trees of the gods, he went straight up to them. A carnelian tree was in fruit, hung with bunches of grapes, lovely to behold. A lapis lazuli tree bore foliage, in all full fruit and gorgeous to gaze on. So this tablet is essentially an epic race with the sun. Sunrise and sunset take place on opposite ends of the earth, duh. And like we said, the path of the sun is the route between these two extremes. So this race must have been equal in length to the entire, diameter? Yeah, the entire diameter of the earth. Crazy distance. And given the amount of time it took him to complete, he must have started before dawn and raced the literal sun, the sun god Shamash, the entire length of the tunnel to get out before the sun rose on the next day. Really an astonishing feat for even our great hero Gilgamesh. Anyway, what's cool is that there's this constant kind of repeating line in this passage where he keeps looking behind him and he can't see what's behind him because it's so dark. And this can be interpreted as maybe him looking back and checking that the sun wasn't catching up with him. And when he finally breaks forth from the darkness, the text states explicitly that he does so before the sun. So Gilgamesh has beaten the sun god Shamash to the far end of the path of the sun. And what he finds on the other side is this beautiful landscape, this forest where the trees are growing jewels. Slay. In Tablet 10, we're introduced to Siduri, and she is the keeper of a tavern on the edge of the ocean. And at the beginning of the tablet, she sees in the distance this wandering, pitiful Gilgamesh, most definitely mentally traumatized from his exhausting day-long race with the sun. Gilgamesh came wandering, and he was clothed in a pelt. He was imbued with menace. He had the flesh of the gods in his body, but there was sorrow in his heart. So he's still bad. Taking him for kind of a delinquent, she kind of locks all her doors and shuts her windows and goes upstairs and hopes that he just passes by and doesn't intrude. Of course he does intrude. He's knocking on her door. He's asking why she's gone and locked all the doors. Look inward, brother. She doesn't really ask, but Gilgamesh tells her anyway about Enkidu and their adventures and their journeys, their various affronts towards the gods. And Siduri asks him how a hero like himself can look so wasted and desolate and disgusting. And he responds, "My friend Enkidu, a mule on the run, donkey of the uplands, panther of the wild, my friend who I'm loved so deeply, who with me went through every danger, the doom of mankind overtook him. For 6 days and 7 nights I wept over him. I did not give him up for burial until a maggot fell from his nostril. I grew fearful of death and so roamed the wild. The case of my friend was too much for me to bear. So on a distant road, I roam the wild. My friend Enkidu, who I love, has turned to clay. Shall not I be like him and also lie down, never to rise again through all eternity?" I think this here is one of the most beautiful and heartbreaking moments in the entire story, where Gilgamesh, the hero, is reduced to this hopeless wanderer, unsure of why he goes on living when his best friend has died. What purpose does this serve when, just like in the beginning, he now no longer has an equal? We see the hero become weak. He couldn't even bear to bury Enkidu until he started to rot in front of him. The realization that Gilgamesh too will have to die fills him with such terror and dread that he goes on this relentless, wild quest for eternal life that he doesn't even think he deserves. I love this part. Siduri, perhaps just eager for this to be over, explains that to find who he's looking for, Gilgamesh must first find Ur-Shanabi, the boatman, who helped Utanapishti cross the waters of death. Luckily, Ur-Shanabi is nearby. He's just cutting timber in the forest. And Gilgamesh goes up to him, and Ur-Shanabi looks at him and is like, "Bro, why do you look so awful? Why are you clad only in a lion's pelt?" Gilgamesh once again explains how Enkidu's death awoke in him a deep desire to never die. And so Ur-Shanabi agrees to help him look for this immortal figure, Utanapishti. The two cross the waters of death, which can be seen as a sort of river Styx of sorts. And the current is so strong and intense, they need 300 oars. As soon as it's used to pull them forward, it breaks because of how intense these waters are. So it's a bit of an arduous journey. Despite mortals not being allowed to actually cross these waters. This keeps happening. Gilgamesh keeps defying what mortals are able to do. Despite this, the two reach the shore and they find Utnapishti on the other side of the waters of death. And again, Gilgamesh is asked why he looks so goddamn awful. That's 3 for 3, unfortunately. Gilgamesh does his whole "my best friend died" spiel, and it's very clear at this point that Gilgamesh, what he really wants is an end of his suffering, and he believes that eternal life will grant him this. May they bar the gate of sorrow, may they seal its doorway. He doesn't want to feel pain anymore. Utnapishti responds with a monologue, calling Gilgamesh a useless king. Why, Gilgamesh, do you constantly chase sorrow? You who are built from the flesh of gods and men. He goes on to say that essentially Gilgamesh is not upholding the 2 most important pillars of kingship. 1, providing for the people of your kingdom, and 2, maintaining a relationship and trust between man and gods. By wandering the world on this futile quest, Gilgamesh is not fulfilling either role. And this is kind of the main theme of this second, darker, more foreboding half of our poem, in which Gilgamesh really just tries to do everything he can to outrun his destiny, unsuccessfully. Utnapishti tells him that this quest in search of immortality has achieved precisely the opposite. It's drained his energy and is bringing about the end of his life far, far sooner. Now, that's what one Alanis Morissette would call ironic. You kept toiling sleepless, and what did you get? You're exhausting yourself with ceaseless toil. You're filling your sinews with pain, bringing nearer the end of your life. Utnapishti reminds us and Gilgamesh of the suddenness of death, of the inevitable mortality of the human race, and the unbridgeable gulf that separates the living and the dead. We in the business call this a bit of a reality check. You are a mortal man, Gilgamesh. You cannot live forever. He also gives us the reason why people die. Sometime long ago, the mother goddess and the great gods got together and distinguished for the first time the difference between mortal and immortal. They decided that only gods would live forever and that men were always destined to die, and that the time of their death could never be certain. A very similar message is told to Gilgamesh in the old Babylonian version of this story by an old alewife. You cannot find the life that you seek. When the gods created mankind, from mankind they established death. Life they kept for themselves. The point is that man must die, for no other reason than such is the fate outlined by the gods millennia before any of us were here. Even the greatest of men and the mightiest of kings must accept that their lives are just subject to the whims of still mightier forces. A king might have power over the mortal realm, but it's not within the power of any human to escape their fate. All who live must also die. This is unfortunately not what Gilgamesh came all this fucking way to hear. He's underwhelmed by Utnapishti, this mythological survivor of the flood, who looks like just some guy. He was expecting a giant, maybe one he would have to fight to earn the secret of immortal life. As I look at you, Utnapishti, your form is not different. You're just like me. You're not different at all. You are just like me. I was fully intent on doing battle with you, but in your presence my hand is stayed. How was it you attended the gods' assembly and found life? It's becoming more and more evident as we progress through this story that Gilgamesh's tactic of fighting any obstacle in his way is just not as effective as it was at the beginning of this story. He can't just throw his sword at a problem. Utnapishti decides to tell Gilgamesh the reason why the gods granted him eternal life. And he tells us the famous myth of the Great Flood in Babylonian mythology, which early in human history almost wiped out the entirety of mankind. This is the part of the story where we get a story within a story. A literary device this epic actually replicates from the 1987 cult classic film The Princess Bride. So I said I would, so I will give you a rundown of the flood myth, which Utnapishti tells to Gilgamesh right now. Once upon a time, in the city of Surapak, when the gods dwelt among men, they decided they didn't want to do that anymore. There is actually no justification in the Epic of Gilgamesh given for why the gods decided to bring about the end of humanity, but they just decided it was time, and they decided to do it with a great flood that would extinguish all of life. The gods all swore not to tell anybody of their plan, but the god Ea, otherwise known as Enki, was kind of fond of humans, and he decided to tell his favorite, Utnapishti, because he wanted him to live and to be able to repopulate the earth. He instructed Utnapishti to tear down the palace and build a big ark, leaving all material goods behind and carrying with him only what was necessary to sustain life in all its varieties. When the ark was finished, he put the various species of animals on board, as well as people skilled in different crafts to preserve life in society, plus his family, plus all of his jewels and riches, which he was explicitly told not to do, but what the hell. And the deluge begins. The violence of the storm that they created shocks even the gods, and they left their homes on earth to take refuge in heaven. The mother goddess was the first to kind of regret this decision, and she wonders how she could have created something to destroy the children of earth like this. The other gods were also kind of regretting their decision a little bit, but more so because without the worship of the people, they grew weak. When the water subsided, Utnapishti opened the ark and saw a flooded wasteland with no survivors. This is when he released 3 birds, which I believe is the same in the biblical account of this story. A dove, a swallow, and a raven he releases to the sky. The dove and the swallow return back to him, obviously finding no sustainable life, but the raven found food and did not return, so he follows the path that the raven took until he finds land. He finds land, he gets off the ark, he makes a sacrifice to the gods. The gods are happy because, oh my god, I thought I was going to die without anyone sacrificing anything to me. But also the gods are like, how are you alive, brother? So Enlil comes down and he's very angry that his plan for the extinction of mankind was thwarted by this mortal guy. Ea defends the mortal that he broke all the rules to save and says to Enlil that if Utnapishti was able to survive this magnificent plan, then he must be pretty intelligent and worth keeping around. And so Enlil came up into the boat. He took hold of my hands and brought me out. He brought out my woman. He made her kneel at my side. He touched our foreheads, standing between us to bless us. In the past, Utnapishti was one of mankind, but now Utnapishti and his woman shall be like us gods. So that's the myth of the flood. That is how he gained immortal life. At the end of his story, Utnapishti turns to Gilgamesh and asks him, who will convene a divine assembly to make you immortal? Utnapishti does not have the secret to eternal life. He was made eternal by favor of the gods under very unique circumstances. But now, who will bring the gods to assembly for you so you can find the life you search for? Ooh, fucking gagged him. Gilgamesh really needs a win, but he's just not going to get one. He, after this episode, just falls asleep. He's exhausted and depressed, and he sleeps for an entire 7 days. A sleep which is undisturbed by his usual array of symbolic dreams. When he wakes, he's confronted with the fact that he just slept for 7 days, and this allows him to realize and confront his human limitations. He's just a guy, and if he can't withstand sleep, how could he conquer death? He knows he can't escape the fate of man, and there's this sad line where he admits that he already knows the angel of death has a hold of him. Wherever he goes, death will also be there, lurking in the shadows, just waiting for the day that it can claim him. It's kind of emblematic of the feeling that all humans have of knowing that death could be imminent. You just have to live with him kind of on your shoulder sometimes. How should I go on, Utnapishti? Where should I go? The thief has taken hold of my flesh. In my bedchamber death abides, and wherever I might turn my face, there too will be death. Yeah, that's rough, buddy. I guess you're just gonna have to deal with it. Utnapishti curses Ursanabi, remember the boatman, because he was not supposed to bring a mortal across the waters of death. That's kind of rule number 1. This is also kind of the poem's way of eradicating a possibility of any future in which another man such as Gilgamesh should cross this barrier and make this quest. No chance of a sequel, you know? Utnapishti tells Gilgamesh to go back to Uruk and continue with his life and hold up his kingly duties, and instructs Ursanabi to bathe him and wash him before his departure. As he's being bathed, the scars that he's accumulated as a hero dissolve, and all trace of the journey he has taken are washed away. He's shedding the hero role, the one he fought so hard to keep, the one he thought would give him eternal fame and glory and life. Gilgamesh boards the boat back with the boatman. They start the journey home when Utnapishti's wife comes out and she asks her husband if he remembered to give Gilgamesh a gift for visiting. Gilgamesh in the boat, he hears this and he's like, let's turn this bitch around. I want a gift. I didn't come all this way for nothing. And Utnapishti concedes that he has one more mystery to reveal to Gilgamesh. There is a plant that Gilgamesh can find which has in it the power of rejuvenation or a return to youth. Kind of immortality if he finds a way to regenerate this plant, I guess. This kind of seems to undermine the entire monologue that Utnapishti just gave about Gilgamesh needing to accept the fact that he is a mortal man. But I think this moment is worth looking at as kind of another test for Gilgamesh to see if he has in fact accepted his fate or if he's just gonna keep on looking for something else to grab hold on because he can't accept his destiny. And he can't accept his destiny because he's like, I could find that plant. Yeah, I'll be young forever. Gilgamesh finds the plant. It doesn't take him very long, but uncertain of Utnapishti's motives, he decides first to take it back to Uruk and to try out on an old man. Because who cares about old people, I guess. Very excited at this prospect of potentially continuous rejuvenation, Gilgamesh sets out back to Uruk finally with the boatman. He's pretty happy. On the way home, they stop and Gilgamesh takes a bath in this pool of water, and distracted, he doesn't notice that a snake comes and grabs the flower lying next to him. As it slithers away, it discards its old skin and becomes young again. You know how snakes be shedding their skin? So it works. That's why snakes do that, by the way, because they have the magic of this plant. But Gilgamesh, finding the plant and seeing at the same time that it does truly work and its magic is real and that it will be forever denied to him, just breaks down in tears. Again, he's come so close to eternity just for it to be snatched from him. Just a streak of losses, really. Then Gilgamesh sat down weeping, the tears streaming down the side of his face. He spoke to Ur-Sanabi, the boatman. For whom of my kind, Ur-Sanabi, did my arms grow exhausted? For whom of my kind ran dry the blood of my heart? Not for myself did I establish a bounty. For the lion of the earth I have done a favor. Had I only turned away and left the boat on the shore. He wishes he'd never even crossed the ocean in the first place because all it's done is add to his suffering. Uttanapishti had no secret of eternal life for him to learn. He couldn't conquer sleep. He failed to bring this plant back to Uruk. The limitations of his mortal self are quite incontrovertibly revealed to him. If the plant was a final test from Uttanapishti, it worked because Gilgamesh is 100% certain of his mortality and also 100% fucking depressed. Finally, Gilgamesh and Ur-Sanabi arrive back in Uruk, and Gilgamesh's story ends the way it began. Gilgamesh spoke to him, to Ur-Sanabi. Go up, Ur-Sanabi, on the wall of Uruk and walk around. Survey the foundation platform, inspect the brickwork. See if its brickwork is not kiln-fired brick, and if the 7 sages did not lay its foundation. 1 sar is the city, 1 sar date grove, 1 sar is clay pit, half a sar the temple of Ishtar. These closing lines are replicated from the very first tablet. On one level, the idea is that Gilgamesh has accepted his mortality, but has also understood that his immortal life lies in what he was able to create, these walls of Uruk. He lives on, essentially immortalized in the wall. But we have to think about the way that the city and this urban center has been talked about throughout the epic. For Babylonians, the city is the institution without which civilization isn't possible. And Uruk is this archetypal Babylonian city. The very last line, 1 sar is city, 1 sar date grove, 1 is clay pit, and half a sar the temple of Ishtar. Gilgamesh is describing what he sees inside the city walls. The city, which is the residential area where people live and raise their families, the date groves where the food and sustenance come from, the agricultural activity and produce, the clay pits where bricks are made, where people are able to construct buildings and figurines and channel their creativity, and of course the temple of Ishtar, where man goes for spiritual and intellectual endeavors. These 4 activities, these 4 parts of the city that he outlines in this final line, are the 4 major activities that sustain human life: procreation, food production, manufacturing, mental, spiritual activity, all these enclosed within the city walls that Gilgamesh created. The final line is not just Gilgamesh accepting that he is mortal and he just has to make do with that. He is telling us, the audience, to look at the city and learn that human life itself is eternal. Not one man, not one mortal can achieve eternal life. That's what he's told us through this entire epic. Gilgamesh has tried time and time again to achieve immortality through fame or glory or through literally trying to live forever and not be able to confront death. Not only is that not possible, that's not relevant. Human life itself is eternal life. Human people come and go, but life itself is eternal. Though men are mortal, mankind is immortal. And by forming part of mankind, he forms part of that eternal life. So do you want to talk about it? Welcome to the other side. The one we promised to meet on in a time you don't remember. It's a little more chill here. Let's just have a chat. We just read a story about a very powerful man coming to terms with his own morality in the face of the gods. I want to talk about what that means. And I have some notes. What I can see really clearly in this is that there's a separation taking place here. The Epic of Gilgamesh presents us with 3 separate life forms: animal, man, god. There's almost a 4th, but it is explicitly denounced. We almost get animal, man, king, god. But our standard Babylonian version of the text presents us with a Gilgamesh who, while is king and has certain responsibilities he has to uphold that other humans don't, is no greater than the mortal man he was born as. Gilgamesh might be a king, but first and more importantly, he's a human. So we have our beings imbued with life: animal, man, god. And the epic essentially works to detail these 3 and the difference between them, kind of creating its own animal kingdom and classifications of a sort. It draws clear boundaries between these 3 states of being, and much of the narrative revolves around what it means to move between them, or to try to. Animals represent the natural state, allegedly incapable of the same level of consciousness that we are so lucky to have as humans. They are not civilized, but they live in balance with the natural world, untouched by cities, language, mortality, or morality for that matter. This peaceful existence is shown to us when Enkidu is created in the wild, an offspring of silence. Right, he runs with the gazelles, he drinks from the rivers, and he lives totally without shame or awareness. Him and the animals don't necessarily fear death because they don't comprehend it. Like, obviously animals have like a survival instinct, right? But their grasp on death and what it means, they're just really chill about it. So by introducing the animals, the epic tells us the general sentiments that the Sumerians and Akkadians had toward what makes man different from animal. Society. Wow. Yeah, true. I would agree. Humanity is social, and it expresses this sociality in the form of cities. Babylonian culture was an urban culture. Cities like Uruk and Babylonia and Ur were the outlines of society, and the walls built to keep them inside also worked to keep the animals roaming the wild, and by extension their animalistic nature, out. But what happens when you divorce humans who, if you'll recall, are actually part of the natural world from their nature? I'm sure you feel it. Your separation from nature, keeping you safe, keeping you human. We've outdone ourselves with what we've been able to create and how well we've been able to convince ourselves that we're not animals. But then there's the call of the wild. If you could step outside and reconcile with a strange Mother Nature and ask for forgiveness for abandoning her, if you knew you'd be forgiven, would you run back into her arms? Or would you be too scared? Would it mean more to you to know that you're different, better, wiser? You're not an animal. You're worth more, right? Prove it. Gilgamesh, dissociated from nature, remember, 2 parts God, 1 part human, that means no part animal, is restless with this separation. Cleaving a divide between man and the animalistic ways of nature, he built the walls of Uruk to keep all that shit out. And he's a tyrant. Though he built civilization, he sacrificed a part of nature to gain it. To balance the scales, Enkidu is birthed from the wild. This doesn't work though, does it? Because Enkidu falls for the allure of humanity. The moment he sleeps with Shamhat, he loses an integral part of his nature. The desires for sex, social connection, and knowledge entice him into a human experience, an agreed social contract, and he's lost Eden. Shamhat teaches him all the human things, like eating bread and drinking beer, the 2 genders. And when he goes to fight Gilgamesh to balance nature's scale, nature loses. Enkidu is plied from his connection with nature and submits to Gilgamesh, tamed. This makes the betrayal even more heartbreaking when Enkidu and Gilgamesh journey to the cedar forest to destroy it. Killing Humbaba, who speaks for the trees, is very symbolic of the human intrusion on nature, destruction for the sake of progress. The Sumerians carried out major deforestation of oak and cedar trees in the forest surrounding Syria and Lebanon. And this episode of our heroes destroying the guardian of the forest is clearly meant to represent the civilization's destruction and triumph over wilderness. The most egregious severance between man and animal is when Enkidu kills another wild being, like a domesticated wolf sicked on other wolves, an animal turned into a weapon of humans against its own nature. That Ovi doesn't end well for Enkidu, does it? He feels a physical pain being separated from nature, but that doesn't stop him from round 2, killing the bull of heaven, another wild beast. His annihilation of these wild beasts is a form of self-annihilation because essentially his destruction of them is what leads to his downfall. The epic takes the stance that when humans deny themselves their nature, pain will follow. To be human is to rise above the animal state, but to bear the burden of doing so. Next we have human, which if you're watching this, I think you probably are. Man, separate from animal, a higher being, one that must determine its own meaning and become very aware of its own mortality. And man is fundamentally limited in the way that gods aren't. What sets humans apart is not just their intelligence, it is their awareness of death. Neither the gods nor animals experience death in the same way that humans do. Gilgamesh and Enkidu both struggle with the knowledge that they're going to die. It's kind of what this whole thing is about. This anxiety drives nearly every major conflict throughout the epic. The finite amount of time we have on Earth compared with our cool and highly intelligent capability to grasp the vastness of the universe inspires in all a little bit of an existential crisis. I remember the moment I understood that I was going to die. I reacted kind of similarly to Gilgamesh, TBH, as I'm sure many of you did, not in terms of like needing to find the elixir of life, more in terms of like the not sleeping and the running around in the wild for a little bit. Although I did actually find the elixir of life as well, but I can't like legally tell you about that. Remember the opening line, the incipit of our epic, he who saw the deep. Remember how I said that I was going to talk about it eventually? This line introduces Gilgamesh as a man who is brushed against divine knowledge, not because he's part god, because he has suffered. He has questioned in a way that has stretched the human condition to its limit. His character development is defined by his desire to transcend human limitations. He doesn't want to die. He wants to have the power of a king, and then he wants to have the power of a god, driving a stake deeper into the chasm he's created in the natural order. His story is emblematic of a very human search for meaning. People are ambitious because what else is there to be? We've been burdened with these crazy cognitive abilities, but what do we do with them? We seek fame and knowledge. We write stories. We fall in love. We question our place in the universe. But we cannot escape our mortality. All these marks we make on Earth, all the people we love, we do this knowing it'll end. We do it because it will end. In past versions of the text, we usually open with the line, surpassing all other kings. This places Gilgamesh above people, above man, perhaps closer to godliness than any mortal could be. But our version sees Gilgamesh deny divinity countless times. He defies the gods by killing Humbaba. He rejects Ishtar's marriage proposal. He runs on foot through the path of the sun. He doesn't see the deep like a god might, dispassionately and eternally, because that's how gods see everything. And his perception isn't shallow like an animal's. His sight is uniquely human. He's lived through loss, grief, love, and fear. He's faced incredible failure. He's felt immeasurable love for Enkidu and then deep sorrow at his death. And he returns from his journey, aka life, with an understanding that no god could teach him and no animal could comprehend. By the end of our story, Gilgamesh is human. He is us. We see the deep. That's our gift as humans. We fight to understand something no god ever could. The gods don't need to fear death, so they don't have to live an impassioned life. It means nothing to them to run out of time, to confess how you feel for someone because you don't know if you'll ever get the chance again, to jump into the water not knowing what's underneath, to feel that adrenaline, that rush, because who knows, I don't know, you could die, but you only live once, so what the fuck does it matter? Seeing the deep is the apex of human potential, not a transgression into godhood. It's something that only humans can do. You are handsome, Enkidu. You are just like a god. Why do you roam the wild with the animals? Shamhat says this to Enkidu when she first meets him. This line right here shows us the hierarchy of the universe. If animals are on one end of the spectrum, gods are their complete opposite. They hoard life for themselves and are the only beings capable of eternal life. Except, of course, Uttapanishtim, because he's a special little cookie. Despite having eternity to work on themselves, the gods act almost childish. I mean, they have nothing pushing themselves to evolve or mature, so what the heck? They fight, they take offense, they change their minds all the time, usually at the expense of mortals. Ishtar has a whole meltdown when Gilgamesh rejects her and literally decimates the city of Uruk about it. The gods get bored with humanity and send the flood and then immediately regret it. And they bestow immortality to Uttanapishti but refuse to do the same for Gilgamesh just because. When Gilgamesh finds Uttapanishti, he is basically asking him for that god life force. Can I exist beyond my limitations as a human? And the answer is no, he can't. Just like how Enkidu was punished for turning his back on the animal world, Gilgamesh has planted himself within humanity and he can't change that. And immortality is not something that can be earned. The gods didn't earn immortality. It's just innate in them. And they actively decided that they were the only ones who would ever have it. There's a cosmic order, babe, and you're just a part of it. So to those reading the Epic of Gilgamesh hoping to find the secret of immortality, unfortunately, it does not offer that. What it does offer you is something much richer. The dignity of death. The sacredness of memory. And that's something the gods won't ever have. They just don't get it like we do. You and me. Humans. Except me, I am actually a god, but I get it anyway. So that's it. That's all I really have to say. This is the longest video I've ever made, and I'm not going to tell you how long I've been working on it because it's actually kind of embarrassing. But I hope it was fruitful for you, and maybe you know more about Gilgamesh than you did an hour ago. Cheers, babe. I'll see you soon. I promise. Mwah.